Hello, and welcome once again to another exciting heretical episode of Inside the World of Mack's Headroom. Um, you know, Today I want to take a trip into my past. No, I haven't joined the Church of Scientology, but I want to take a trip into my past in terms of the past being relative to when I began this YouTube station. Because one of the things I started to do about, I don't know, a year and a couple months ago, uh, was I did a series of martial arts tapes. And I've periodically, if you look at my whole station, you'll see I do periodically some martial arts tapes because I'm a big martial arts fan and spent a big part of my childhood practicing martial arts and stuff. And so I still am a fan. And I want to go back because the very first like 6 or 7 videos I did for YouTube was on martial arts. And it seemed like there were a bunch of people out there in the martial arts community who liked what I had to say regarding the infamous Count Dante. And they seemed to be loyal viewers, so I thought maybe I would try to present them and anybody else who's interested in a little treat about a martial arts man who has really captured my attention. And that is a gentleman by the name of E. Long. It's spelled Y-I, that's the first name, and then L-O-N-G. E. Long. He is Chinese, and he's just a really amazing fighter, especially in lieu of the sort of popular consensus that so many Chinese martial arts are, full of shit and frauds and they don't work. And I've seen videos where these guys get their asses kicked, in 2 seconds. And so I know there's a lot of these, sort of like really pure martial arts, which probably resemble more like dancing, maybe a little bit like Bruce Lee. But but anyway, I'm quite aware that the Chinese martial arts have their flaws. But this guy, to me, is really quite amazing. Now, he's not perfect, but he's very interesting, and I want to just share a little bit about him. I've been watching his fights like just constantly. And the most interesting thing about it is, first of all, he is a Chinese martial artist who also, in kind of his bag of tricks, also identifies with Muay Thai, which obviously isn't Chinese, but nonetheless, I mean, he's very much into Chinese martial arts. And furthermore, he is a self-proclaimed, I believe, I've done some research on it, and I can't seem to get a real straight answer, but it seems to me like he is a self-proclaimed Shaolin monk. And he looks the part, he dresses the part. I heard him interviewed by Ramsey Dewey, and or Dewey Ramsey, but I always get that one confused. But nonetheless, he's a very cool guy. And I saw Ramsey interview Elong, and I was so impressed. It was like I had to be watching him talk to a monk because the guy was so cool. But then I saw a picture in a fight one time of what appeared to be his wife or his girlfriend. And that seemed a little oxymoronic to the notion of being a monk, because I think monks take a vow of chastity, if I'm not mistaken, or celibacy. I don't know, whatever you call it. So he's a bit of a mystery, and I started to do some research on the guy. And first of all, let me just read you a little bit about him, if I can just get my phone to go on here. And I just want to tell you a little bit about him. This is just taken from Wikipedia, okay? E. Long, birth name Liu Exjung, I don't know, I can't pronounce it, is a practitioner of Chinese wushu and other martial arts who competes in the super welterweight, and super middleweight divisions. And then they've got a bunch of things about him. For instance, other names, Factuer Yi Long, and the other one, the other name he's known by is Shaolin Monk. His nationality is Chinese. His height is 1.76 meters. That's 5 feet 9.5 inches tall. He's 162 pounds, and his style is defined according to Wikipedia as 1, Shaolin Kung Fu, 2, Wing Chun. Another one that I've been watching and I've been seeing it on these fights he fights, and they say, well, he fights from this style. I've never heard of it before, but I'm an old fart. What does that mean? But it's called Sanda? I don't know. And also Muay Thai. Um, and he's been actively fighting since 2009. Here's his record. It's interesting. He's had 74 total professional fights. He's had 61 wins. 23 of those are by knockout. He's had 12 losses, many of which I've seen. And 5 of those were by knockout. And there was 1 draw. But I want to explain a little bit about what he fights with, or what organization he fights with, because it's very, very interesting. Oh, I can't find it. But anyway, from what I can gather, just as an observer, in China, the so-called UFC or MMA, however you want to define it, in China is far different than what it is in, well, especially the United States. And the biggest difference, well, one, they don't fight in an octagon, which I like. I hate that octagon. I just think it just kind of brutalizes the art aspect of whatever you want to call MMA. I don't like the octagon. They fight in a boxing ring. And the other thing that's very, very different about it is there's no ground game. Now, many of you UFC people may be saying, oh, fuck, man, no ground game, no ground and pound, what the fuck? I don't even want to watch something where somebody doesn't get strangled and submitted, you know? And I'm not knocking, Gracie Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or any of that kind of stuff, because it's very formidable. However, one of the things I mentioned in another tape I did about the UFC is that the rules that one has to ascribe to in whatever organization you're fighting with highly defines the style of fighting that you're going to do. So to say just because there's no ground game in this like very commercialized Chinese like form, it has a special name. I couldn't find it in my phone fast enough. But this thing in China has no ground game whatsoever. And as soon as somebody goes to the ground, they make them get back up again. However, there is one thing that's very different about this. And some of you stone cold UFC people would say, ah, bullshit. But I'm telling you, it's very different in the regards that while there's no ground game, 2 sort of angles of fighting which are in this Chinese organization and not so much in the UFC is 1, throwing, and 2, sweeping. And it really changes the complexion of the whole fight when you replace the ground game with throwing and sweeping. It's a very different game. And when you take them out of the octagon and put them in a boxing ring. And they also wear full-sized, like Muay Thai style gloves. Now, I've always been a proponent of those gloves. The reason I think primarily being that it takes a shitload of power to knock somebody out with a big foam glove on, as opposed to getting smacked with a little thin, MMA type glove. Yeah, you don't get cut as easy, but I've seen fuckers get cut with, the padded tie-style gloves also. And so I've always thought those gloves are good. They don't wear pads on their feet like the old, what we call PKA, Pro Kickboxing Association. They don't wear, foot pads or anything like that. They just wear these big gloves, much like Muay Thai. And it's amazing how the complexion of the fight changes. I mean, it's just like saying, if Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali or whoever else was in a boxing match, these people will say, Horace Gracie could get Muhammad Ali on the ground in 1 minute and submit him. Well, that may possibly be true, but you have to realize boxing's boxing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, the only thing you're doing by sort of saying, well, it's not all out this and that, the only thing you're really doing is just structuring the sport itself, right, by the rules which define it, okay? So in this particular form of MMA, and the Thai dudes are real into it. There's a lot of guys from Thailand that go to China and fight in this league. And I think Muay Thai people are the toughest guys I've seen. I don't care. You know, you can diss me in the comment section below. But I really have an admiration for Muay Thai. Never studied it, but I really, really think it's just so formidable and tough. Oh, unbelievable. Anyway, um, so back to Yi Long. He calls himself a Shaolin monk, and he dresses the part when you see him, you know, like come on stage and stuff, or come down the ring. I mean, he's dressed like a monk. He wears, most often, I've seen him in like Muay Thai shorts too, but he wears like a Chinese sort of like below the knee length yellow pair of like baggy trousers that has like these funny like knee socks attached to them. But it looks very monk-like. I mean, that's the idea. Um, and I thought actually he was a monk. However, I did some research and found out that actually he could be a monk, but it's likely that there's a word they use for it. I want to say secular, like a secular monk or a non-secular monk. I don't really understand it completely, but the idea is some big Shaolin monk guy made a internet posting that said Yi Long is in no way a Shaolin monk. They directed somebody to all the monks that ever existed. He's not in there. But then another person said that it's kind of interesting because the Chinese culture respects the whole notion of Shaolin so much that it ain't so hard to become a monk. I mean, I hate to be cynical about something so spiritual, but you know, it almost sounded from this article I read like you could become a Shaolin monk, much like people became members of the Black Dragon Fighting Society by advertisements in comic books. Now, I'm sure it's not that bad, but the idea was that since Shaolin is so respected in China, they want to encourage anybody to follow whatever kind of code one would have in trying to live a more orthodox lifestyle. So he may be, I think they call it a secular monk, but don't quote me. I get confused with those words. But anyway, I saw him interviewed, as I mentioned, with Ramsey Dewey. And like, I just found this guy so humble. Yeah, he had a pair of gradient glasses that made him look a little hip. But, I mean, he was dressed very formally in, you know, monk type stuff. There were a couple of quotes that he made that just really, really sort of tickled my toes. I mean, like one was he said, well, you know, since he's been fighting professionally, you know, he really kind of doesn't like it as much as when he was just fighting like just for the fun of it, because actually what he said was that as soon as you start fighting for money, there's too much on the line and the fight can't be so fun. But when you're just fighting for the sake of fighting to see how you can do and how you stack up against somebody else, it's a blast. Now, he didn't say it quite like that, and he doesn't speak English. You know, there was a translator. But I thought that was very cool that the guy, you know, again, seemed to be sort of monk-like in the sense that he was kind of not getting into this notion of making money or not liking the participation in the art as much when money's on the line, but money's talks. So, you know, he does it. Now, is that monk-like? I don't know. But nonetheless, he's a very humble guy. He's not very fond of Dana White, so I don't know what that means. I'm not too fond of Dana White either, really. But it's a very, very interesting fight. One of the things that I find most interesting about Yi Long is that you know, let me just say something briefly. I have a friend who's a black belt in Aikido, and one time I said to him, I said, you know, did you ever feel this, you know, ki force? I mean, did you ever feel like in one with the eternal universe, or, you know, your chakras or whatever? Did you get a boner? I don't know. But I mean, you know, I'm sorry, that was vulgar. But, you know, did you ever feel any sort of ki? And he said, nah, not really. He said he really liked Aikido because it's completely defensive, and he liked that idea. And he says he just likes the idea of movement in the way that they do it. But no, he never felt any sort of supernatural connection with some sort of, you know, eternal spirit or anything like that. And you know, when you watch Aikido, guys, a lot of times it looks so choreographed that you can't even it. Like, it almost looks make believe anyway. However, when you watch Yi Long, who's not an Aikido guy whatsoever, um, you can see how this guy punches, especially punches, where he sort of, it almost reminds me of like a fencing match where a guy would go, whoa, like that and kind of lean forward. Well, that's what he does with this thrust punch he's got. And he can leap, like, I don't know, 3-4 feet. And it's the momentum behind his movement that's connected with the force and twisting motion of the punch that creates this amazing amount of power. And I think that that's probably chi, because in Chinese it would be called chi, not ki, right? So I really think that I observed finally what chi really is, because I can see the fluidity of his motion, like in sort of like harmony with the universe. I mean, it's you should watch the guy. It's really amazing. The other thing he does that I have never seen done as efficaciously in the UFC is, I don't want to exaggerate, but not too many guys get away with kicking Elong in the head. Why? Because he's got this technique of combining catching the leg and sweeping the guy's rear leg and just whipping him in the air. I mean, the guy goes flying. It looks like one of those phony, Hong Kong martial arts movies. And he can do that repeatedly with hardly any effort. He's got to be connected to some kind of force. What it is, I'm going to assume is chi. But it's amazing. I mean, I've seen him toss a guy down 3-4 times, just like whoop, like that, But I studied. I put it in slow motion. I studied what he does. And what happens is, especially when, like, he fights a lot of Muay Thai guys, and so they have that kick that, I don't know how to explain it. You raise your leg up real high and you swing it around and you come down, or like a regular kind of roundhouse kick, high to the head roundhouse kick. All he does is he blocks it by hooking his hand around the leg and wedging it somehow between his cheek, and very quickly sweeps the guy's back leg. So it's not like he's just grabbing the leg and flipping it, because we've all tried that, and half the time it works and half the time it doesn't, But what he combined with the sweep, it's just like ballet. It's almost like Rudolf Nureyev, far cry from Rudolf Nureyev, but you get the point. And I was very impressed with that. Another thing this guy does that's very interesting. Everybody thinks of like Chinese martial arts as all this, and standing at a distance and leaping and stuff like that. This dude reminds me of a prize fighter who takes the aggressive position. In other words, when he's even moving around and stuff like that, he's constantly in control of where the other person is standing. And he likes to get guys in the corner. Well, I guess everybody does. But, I mean, he is 9 out of 10 times, unless he's having a bad fight, like everybody does, he has tremendous control of where his opponent stands in the ring in relation to him. So I would assume that he's a very aggressive fighter, but quietly aggressive. It's not all that, I don't know. I have a disdain for some of the things that goes on in the UFC particularly. I mean, some of the other ones, like what's called Belcor or something, I think they're a little more reasonable. But UFC, I just got issues with it. I'm sorry. I don't mean to insult anybody. I hope you don't start, trolling me in the comment section. But, one thing I said in another tape is I don't think the UFC is the least bit showing any examples of humility or of primarily humility and attitude. There's attitude there, but it's just like aggression. I think Conor McGregor would be probably one of the greatest examples of that. Great fighter, not much of an artist. I mean, he's an artist in his own way, but he's more like a mechanic. You know what I mean? But there's no art. There's no humility. There's no respect. He's just one tough dude, and I respect him for that. But one day he's going to get his ass kicked. Trust me, because everybody does. All great fighters push themselves past their limits and then start to take a fall late in their career because they're too stupid to retire while things are good. I mean, I've seen that happen, incredible amounts of time. And so, eventually Conor McGregor is going to go down. And it may even be with a shoulder smack, like he did to the Cowboy. Who knows? But eventually, Conor McGregor's going to lose. Now, Elon has already lost. I mentioned I forgot how many, but you know he had a number of losses, and I've seen them. When you watch how the guy accepts defeat, and you can see he's like just so disappointed inside, but he's so humble about it. Um, it's very I don't know, refreshing. I think the most macho thing this guy does is he holds his hands out like this all the time. You know, like whenever. Oh, and I've also seen him do some other things that are kind of incredible. Like one time, he must have felt very in control of a fight, and he must have worn down his opponent pretty well. And so what happened was he just let the guy smack him full force in the face. He just dropped his gloves and just went. I was smiling and going like that. Now maybe that's not humble. I don't know, but it certainly isn't so disrespectful. He's giving the guy every chance he can have to knock him out. But I mean, I saw him take like 6 big ones. It was just right in his head, in his face, in his jaw. It didn't matter. Now, maybe the guy was really worn out and it was a strategic move, you know, to psych him out. But see, that to me is a martial art. You know, when you're thinking strategic like that, how can I psych somebody out and stuff? That to me gets into martial arts, not into martial war. Um, so I guess that's my big deal for today. I would like to encourage people because I stumbled across them by accident just by looking at these you know, martial arts debunking channels on YouTube because I kind of get a kick out of that. Pink Man, you know, thumbs up for you. I don't know what happened to you, but I love your videos. They're so humorous and so exposing. And so I was watching them, and then all of a sudden I see this guy E Long, and I go, oh, I'm going to watch this guy get his ass kicked, and I was like just astounded. I was just astounded. Now, am I saying he's the best guy in the world? No. I'm not even saying he's better than Conor McGregor or anybody else. I will sort of go on record as saying that he might be the real Bruce Lee. But I didn't say that because too many people think Bruce Lee is the toughest guy that ever lived. I won't comment. But anyway, I'll expect to get some nice comments for that one in the comment section below. But I'm an honest guy. You can't fault me for that. So this has been fun. I wanted to talk about this guy. I hope that my initial subscribers who got hooked into my, not hooked in, but you know, into my martial arts tapes might appreciate this. Maybe you won't. But if nothing else, okay, if you don't get anything else, or you think everything I've said is bullshit today, what I would strongly suggest doing is just looking up YI-LONG on YouTube and watch this dude fight. Now, on YouTube, you're going to see him take some beatings too. So it's not don't turn it on and happen to fall into one of those fights and think I'm, you know, loony. But if you get nothing else out of this tape, just tune in the guy and watch what I consider to be a true martial artist who could really kick ass. And with that, thank you very much. And once again, this has been another exciting heretical episode of Inside the World of Mack's Headroom. Have a nice Sunday.